Me, Desmond, 28. Insurance claims adjuster. My whole job is looking at other people's damage and putting a number on it. Car got totaled, roof caved in, basement flooded, whatever it is, I show up. I document it, I write the report. Photos, measurements, receipts, then a verdict at the bottom. Approved, partially approved, denied. Been doing it long enough that I read a room the same way I read a claim. What's real, what's inflated, what somebody is quietly trying to get away with. Tell you all this up front because it matters later, I promise. So, I had a girlfriend, Priya, 26, project manager at a logistics company. We met through a mutual friend at a backyard barbecue, and honestly, it was easy at the start. She was sharp, she was funny, she remembered small things I said and brought them back up weeks later. Had her whole life together in a way I found kind of impressive. I am not a naturally organized person outside of work. On the job, I am a machine. At home, I lose my keys twice a week and forget birthdays. Figured she was the organized one and I was the easygoing one and that we balanced out. The first few months were good. I want to be fair about that. We traveled a little, we cooked together, we had the kind of stretch where you start assuming this is the person. There was a weekend early on where my car broke down 2 hours out of the city and she drove all the way to get me without complaining once. Told that story to my friend at the time like it was proof I'd found somebody solid. Should have paid more attention to the smaller stuff, like how she'd reorganize my cabinets when she stayed over and then get quietly annoyed when I put things back where I could actually find them. At the time, I read it as her caring. Now I'd call it the first draft of the same thing that came later. There was a warmth to her early on that was real. I'm not going to rewrite that part just because of how it ended. She'd leave little notes, she'd remember the coffee order, she'd ask about my day, and actually listen to the answer. Which is maybe why I let the rest slide as long as I did, because I kept measuring the present against that early version of her. Then the system started. Priya loved the word structure. She said it more than she said my name, and I'm only half joking about that. Every corner of her life had a framework bolted onto it. Her mornings ran on a routine, her weekends were blocked out in advance, her friendships had a color-coded thing on her phone that I once saw over her shoulder. The report wasn't even the first thing she tried, now that I lay it all out. Before that, there was a shared spreadsheet for chores that graded who did what. Then, a weekly check-in meeting, her words, meeting. That had an agenda she'd type up in advance. I went along with those because on paper they sounded reasonable, and I figured a little organization never hurt anyone. Each one started as something small and helpful, and slowly turned into another place I could come up short. The check-in meetings in particular started feeling less like talking and more like sitting across a desk from someone reviewing my file. So by the time the report showed up, the ground had already been prepared. I'd just been too agreeable to notice the pattern forming. At some point, she decided the relationship needed a framework too. The night she brought it up sticks with me because she had the exact look she gets before a big work meeting, this focused, slightly wound-up energy. We were at her place, dinner done, and she said she'd been thinking a lot about us and wanted us to be more intentional. Fine, I said. Intentional sounds good. I can do intentional. Then she explained what intentional actually meant to her. She wanted me to send her a weekly effort report. I laughed, genuinely thought it was a bit like she was doing a character to be funny. She did not laugh back. Instead, she picked up her phone and turned the screen toward me. There was already a calendar reminder built, titled Desmond Weekly Effort Report, set to repeat every Friday at 6 p.m., no end date. She had made the thing before, she'd even asked me if I was okay with it. Looking back, that was the entire relationship in one screenshot. But I liked her, so I let it slide. Her reasoning was that relationships die because people quietly stop trying and never notice it's happening. A report, she said, would keep me accountable, keep me present, stop me from coasting. Men especially coast, was how she put it. Men let women carry the emotional load and never even register the weight. I said I didn't think I was coasting. She said that's precisely what a coasting man would say. Tough to argue with a system where every denial counts as more proof. First Friday rolls around. The reminder goes off on her phone while we're sitting together, and she just looks at me and waits. So I write the thing, half as a joke, keeping it light. Cooked dinner twice this week, planned Saturday, fixed the drawer that kept sticking, picked up her prescription when she was slammed at work. Hit send. Felt ridiculous. like I was filing a claim on my own life to an adjuster who wasn't me. Her reply was not a thank you, and it was not a little heart. She sent back edits. Actual edits like a manager returning a draft. Said it was a decent start, but too surface level, too much of a list. She wanted me to describe how each thing made her feel valued, in my own words, written from her point of view. Read that request twice to make sure I understood it. She wanted me to imagine her emotions, and then write them down as though they were facts I had earned and could be graded on. This is the exact moment a normal person gets up and leaves. I am apparently not that person, because I decided instead that I would simply do it well. This is the part of my brain that gets me into trouble. Somebody hands me a report format, and something in me needs to ace it. Occupational hazard, genuinely. So, I leaned in. The next Friday's report was a paragraph longer. I listed the gestures, and then, underneath, I wrote careful little notes about how each one supposedly landed for her. She gave it a 6 out of 10. There was a scale now, apparently. Told me the week before had been a 7, and this one felt weaker, less thoughtful, more transactional. I asked how last week scored a 7, when I didn't even know a number existed until right now. She said she'd been scoring privately for a while to build a baseline. A baseline. Like I was a claim she was quietly assembling a case file on before I even knew I was under review. Eventually she wrote up an actual rubric so I'd know what I was being measured on, which she framed as her being generous and transparent. There were categories: thoughtfulness, initiative, consistency, emotional presence, each with its own little description of what a high mark looked like. I read the whole thing standing in her kitchen and felt something I can only describe as the feeling you get reading the fine print on a policy that's designed so you never actually collect. Every category had a way to lose points and no clear ceiling for gaining them. A 10 was described as exceeding expectations, which by definition kept moving because the moment you met an expectation, it wasn't exceeding anything anymore. Asked her, kind of joking, if anyone had ever actually gotten a 10. She said not yet, but she believed I had the potential. The potential. So the top of the scale was a place that existed mainly to remind me I wasn't there. One week I actually put my heart into the writing part instead of just gaming the score. Wrote something honest about why I was glad I'd met her, what I actually felt, no strategy behind it. She edited it, sent it back with notes saying it was a nice sentiment, but I should tie the feelings to specific supporting actions to make it more credible. Make my feelings more credible. A genuine thing I wrote got returned like a claim that lacked documentation. After that, I stopped writing anything real in them and just fed the machine what it wanted, which honestly made the whole thing easier and sadder at the same time. I also stopped telling my other friends about any of it. The one who introduced us knew, and the school friend found out later, but the rest I kept in the dark. Partly embarrassment, partly I didn't want to hear out loud what I already suspected. Skipped a few nights out because I didn't have a clean answer for how things were going. You end up a little isolated by a thing like this, not because anyone pushes you away, but because explaining it makes it real. This is where the job started really gnawing at me during the day. I spend every shift assessing damage with evidence. I don't get to call a roof destroyed because I feel like it. I have to prove it, photograph it, justify it in writing, and a manager above me can overturn my call if I got it wrong. There are rules, there's a process, there is an appeal built into the whole thing. This had none of that. One adjuster, no oversight, no appeal. Priya assessed, Priya scored, and Priya was also the standard the score was measured against. Brought that up once, kept it calm, asked whether there'd ever be a report running the other direction, something about her effort, so at least it was mutual. She looked at me like I'd said something genuinely dumb, told me she was the result, not a variable. The whole project's success was defined as her being happy, so scoring her would be scoring the outcome, which to her made no sense. Translation, I was the labor, and she was the metric. Didn't have a comeback ready, so I let it drop, which I was getting alarmingly good at. A few weeks in, she started involving her friends. Priya ran with a group of 4 or 5 women, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend I remember all their names because half of them I met exactly once. They had a group chat, and she showed me pieces of it now and then, proud. One of them called the report iconic. Another said she was going to make her own boyfriend do the same and asked Priya to forward the template. Heard later that the boyfriend flat out refused, and there was a whole thing about it in the chat. The group decided he was, you guessed it, showing his true toxic colors by not wanting to be graded. Meanwhile, I was the good example, the one who complied, held up as proof it could be done. Funny how being the compliant one bought me exactly nothing in the end, same as the guy who refused. The difference was, he saved himself a year. A third one wrote, and this line lodged in me, that it was refreshing to finally see a man being held accountable for once. Held accountable. For cooking dinner and fixing a drawer that stuck. They treated the whole thing like some small overdue revolution. And Priya absolutely glowed under the attention. That glow, I figured out way too late, was most of the actual point. The reports weren't really for us. They were material for the group chat, a weekly episode she got to narrate. There was a dinner around then that I still think about. 3 or 4 of the friends came over, and at some point the conversation turned to me, right there at the table. Priya, laughing, pulled up my latest report on her phone and read parts of it out loud to them. My gestures, my careful little notes about her feelings, read aloud in this amused voice while they grinned. They weren't cruel about it exactly. It was more that I'd become the funny recurring bit, the boyfriend who files paperwork. I sat there with a plate in front of me, smiling because what else do you do while my private attempts to be a good partner got performed as comedy for the room? One of them turned to me and said it was good that Priya had finally found a man willing to do the work. Another asked, half teasing, what my current score was, like it was a normal thing to ask a man at dinner. Priya answered for me before I could, told them I was hovering around a 6 lately, but had room to grow. They laughed, warm about it, and somebody said, at least he's trainable. Trainable? I said something agreeable and got up to refill drinks so I'd have a reason to leave the table. Stood in the kitchen for a minute longer than I needed to. Could hear them still talking about it in the other room, the report, the scores, the whole bit. Like it was the funniest running joke they had. That night was the first time it occurred to me that I wasn't a boyfriend in this setup. I was a project she got to show off at stand-up. And the group wasn't an audience, they were more like a review board that had already decided I was underperforming before I ever walked in. Things escalated the way these things always do, gradually and then all at once. A report every week turned into a report with a required minimum length. One-line items didn't count anymore, she said, because anything short proved I hadn't actually reflected. Reflected. I started keeping a running note on my phone through the week so I wouldn't forget anything I'd done. Because forgetting something meant it may as well not have happened when Friday came. Sit with that for a second. I was collecting evidence of my own kindness in real time, all week, in case I got audited on it. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I noticed I'd started second-guessing myself constantly. I'd do something nice and immediately wonder how it would score instead of just enjoying that I'd made her happy. Caught myself rehearsing the wording of the report while the week was still happening. A good partner in my head stopped meaning a person she was glad to be with, and started meaning a person who cleared the number. A low score on a Friday could put me in a bad mood the whole weekend. Walked around feeling vaguely like I was failing at something, even when I couldn't point to what. That's the part that's hard to explain to people who weren't in it. It wasn't one big cruel moment, it was a slow drip of being told, in a friendly, organized voice, that I wasn't quite enough. And you start to believe the drip before you notice it's happening. The bar moved every single time. Whatever earned an 8 one week quietly became the baseline the next. Flowers were a lovely surprise the first time, and a bare expectation by the third. A spontaneous drive out to the coast scored well, so the very next week, a calm evening at home got marked down for lacking initiative. The harder I tried, the cooler the reception got. One week I organized a whole surprise day for her. Breakfast out, a hike she'd mentioned wanting to do, dinner at a place she liked. Scored a 9, which was the highest I ever got. Felt good for about a day. The next report I did a solid normal week and she gave it a 5 and wrote that it was a letdown after the 9. So beating my own best score just raised the floor I'd be judged against forever. Learned that lesson fast. Another week I was slammed at work, a bad stretch of overtime, and I still managed dinner a couple of nights and a small gift. She docked me for what she called reduced availability. Reduced availability. Like I was a service with an uptime rating. Started to notice she never scored the weeks where she was busy against herself, only the weeks where I was busy against me. My birthday landed somewhere in this stretch. She got me a gift, a decent one, thoughtful even, and I was genuinely happy about it. Then within the same week it turned up as evidence. She mentioned, during a small disagreement, how much attention she'd put into my birthday, as a way of showing the effort wasn't as one-sided as I thought. So, the one big thing she did for me existed partly to be entered into the record and withdrawn later when she needed the balance to look even. Even my own birthday somehow ended up on her side of the ledger. Effort stopped being a gift and turned into rent. And rent only ever gets noticed when it's late. There was a claim at work in the middle of all this that hit a little too close. Guy had been paying premiums on a property for years, never missed one, and when something finally went wrong, the fine print meant he got almost nothing back. Everything he'd put in for years just vanished into the account, and the one time he needed it to count, it didn't. I remember filing that one and feeling weirdly sick about it, and it took me a day to realize why. The reports also started showing up in regular arguments, which was new. We'd disagree about something completely unrelated, where to spend a holiday, whose family to visit, and she'd reach back into the archive. She'd remind me that I scored a 4 back in some weak months earlier as evidence that I had a pattern. The reports had turned into a permanent record she could pull from whenever she needed leverage. You say one wrong thing on a Tuesday and it's cross-referenced against your entire filed history. At work, at least there's a statute of limitations on old claims. Here, nothing ever aged out. Every low score I'd ever gotten stayed live, ready to be cited. I got actually sick not long after. Real sick, flat on my back for most of a week, could barely keep water down or stand up without the room tilting. Friday came and went, and I didn't send a report because I was unconscious at 6 p.m. The next day she raised it. Not how are you feeling, not can I bring you anything. She said we needed to talk about the missed deadline and my engagement level. Deadline. I had a fever, and I had missed a deadline. Lying there, I remember thinking that my actual employer gives me sick days, and my girlfriend apparently did not. Said nothing, of course, just nodded and told her I'd catch up. And I did catch up. Wrote 2 reports that weekend to close the gap, like a kid turning in late homework, hoping the teacher won't dock him. There was a stretch not long after where I was the one going through it. Lost someone in my family, not going to get into it, but I was flattened for a while. The support I got from her was thin, and I noticed she seemed almost impatient with it, like my grief was throwing off the schedule. She did drop off some food once, which was genuinely kind, and I was grateful. But then it showed up. A week or 2 later, in conversation, she referenced the fact that she'd brought me food during a hard time, as an example of her effort in the relationship. The one clearly caring thing she did got logged and cited back to me like a line item. Meanwhile, I was still filing full reports on my own devotion, while barely holding it together. That was the first time I felt something in me go cold toward her, though I didn't act on it yet. A guy I work with noticed something was off around this time. He's the type who barely talks, so when he asked if I was all right, it actually landed. Told him a watered-down version, just that my girlfriend had me on a kind of weekly review. He didn't laugh, which I appreciated. He just said, "That sounds like a lot for something that's supposed to be the easy part of your life. The easy part of your life." Hadn't thought of it that way in a long time, that this was supposed to be the place I rested, not the second shift. We handle claims where people are clearly in a bad situation, but the paperwork is the only thing keeping the whole thing from falling apart. And you can tell the process has become the point instead of the person. Started seeing my own relationship in those files. A lot of structure wrapped around something that had quietly stopped functioning underneath. The friend is what finally cracked the whole thing open for me. I've got this one friend, known him since school, steady guy, tells you the truth even when you'd rather he didn't. One night, we're grabbing food and he asks how it's going with Priya. Don't know exactly why, but I just handed him my phone with a report open on it. Watched his face while he read. He got through the whole thing. Then he scrolled to the score she'd given it. Then he set the phone down and looked at me for a long second. Said, in this flat voice I won't forget, that this wasn't a relationship, it was a performance review. Then he asked where my raise was, where my paid time off was, whether I could ever actually get promoted, or whether I was going to be probationary until the day I died. I didn't have an answer, and the silence answered for me. On the drive home, I did the thing I do at work without even deciding to. Started tallying, ran the whole year through my head like it was a claim I'd been assigned. Column 1, everything I put in. The dinners, the fixes, the drives, the gifts, the reports, the scoring, the eggshells every single Friday. Column 2, everything that came back. Column 2 was nearly empty. Not because she was openly cruel, she mostly wasn't. Because every good thing I did got absorbed into the baseline and quietly disappeared. You can't collect on something that's now simply expected. Same reason a roof that's supposed to be there doesn't earn anybody a payout. The tally showed me something else too, something I hadn't clocked while it was happening. A bunch of things I used to do for myself had quietly dropped off the list. Hadn't seen the school friend as much, let a hobby go, stopped taking the long way home just to clear my head. All that time and energy had been rerouted into hitting a number every Friday. The relationship hadn't just gone one-sided, it had slowly eaten the parts of my week that were mine, and none of that showed up in any report, because the report only ever measured what I gave her, never what it cost me. The group chat cooked up the next escalation for her, naturally. Priya told me, actually excited about it, that they had suggested adding quarterly goals. Quarterly, like a work review cycle with a beginning, middle, and end. She wanted us to sit down and set targets for the next 3 months, so I'd have long-term metrics to be measured against, not just weekly ones. She'd already started a document. Of course she had. Showed it to me, and there were sections, headers, a place for me to sign off on my own objectives. One of the targets was to increase what she called quality time initiations by a set number per month, an actual number. She wanted me to plan a measurable amount of dates per quarter and hit it like a sales quota. Another line was about improving emotional attunement, which, as far as I could tell, meant guessing her mood correctly more often. There was even a section for what she called stretch goals, the extra stuff above baseline that would earn bonus consideration. Bonus consideration. I asked what I got if I hit all the targets. She said the reward was a healthy relationship. So, the compensation for hitting my quota was being allowed to keep the job. Somewhere in here is when I started actually listening to what she believed about men, because before this, I'd mostly tuned it out. Priya had a full theory. She thought most men were low-key toxic and didn't even know it. Not violent, not loud, just, in her words, conditioned from birth to take up space and take women for granted. Effort to her didn't come naturally to men and had to be trained in, tracked, reinforced, the way you'd shape any behavior in anything. The report, in her mind, wasn't an insult. It was correction. She honestly believed she was repairing something broken in me that I was too toxic to even see on my own. And the genuinely wild part is that I'd half started to believe it too. When someone scores you low enough for long enough, you quietly begin assuming the problem must be you. That's the whole trap right there. We actually argued about it once, the toxicity thing. I asked her, if I was so conditioned and coasting, why I was the one cooking and planning and filing weekly paperwork on my own devotion. She said the fact that I needed the system to do it just proved the system was necessary. So doing the work was evidence against me, and needing to be told to do the work was also evidence against me. Couldn't find the exit in that logic, so I stopped looking for one and just felt tired. She brought the toxicity thing up in front of her friends too, more than once. They'd nod along like it was settled science. This idea that a man had to be actively managed, or he'd default to selfishness. One time, I pushed back gently and said, maybe some guys just show love differently, not worse. Priya said that was the kind of excuse toxic men hide behind. So caring in a way that didn't fit her metric was reframed as me making excuses for being toxic. Every road led back to the same verdict no matter which way I drove it. The assumption underneath all of it was that anything I felt or did was suspect until proven otherwise. And I never got to be the one holding the proof. The anniversary is where the whole thing finally came to a head. We'd been together long enough that this one felt like it should mean something, like a real marker. So I went all in, and I mean I hit every single criterion she had ever written into a report over the whole year. Booked the type of evening she'd scored highly before, cooked the exact meal she'd once rated, well, had the flowers, wrote the little note by hand because a handwritten thing had earned a good number once. Basically reverse engineered a perfect score and built the entire night around delivering it. Set the table at her place, candles going, everything timed and ready. Then I waited. She was late. Not a little late either. She'd given me a time, and that time came and went. Texted her, no reply. An hour crawled by, food going cold, candles burning down to stubs. Sat there refreshing my phone, telling myself she'd walk in any minute with a good reason. Reheated part of the meal once, then gave up on it. Kept thinking about the reports, weirdly, about how a 2-hour no-show with zero warning would have been an automatic low score if I'd done it to her. But there was no version of the report that ran the other way. I'd learned that months ago. Almost 2 hours after the time she'd told me, the door finally opens. She comes in, and I can tell from the way she's talking, loose and a bit scattered, that she'd been out with the group the whole time and lost track of the clock. Her eyes land on the table, and then comes the sentence, the one I'm going to be hearing in my head for a good while. She looks at the whole thing, the meal, the candles, the flowers, the effort, and she asks whether this is going on, this week's report, or last week's. That's it. Not sorry I'm late, not this is beautiful, not even a simple thank you. Her first instinct, staring at a dinner I'd built specifically to prove I loved her, was to sort out the correct accounting period for it. I didn't yell, didn't launch into a speech, didn't slam anything. Something in me just went quiet. The way a phone call goes quiet when you already know the answer, and you're only staying on the line long enough to hang up cleanly. I slid my phone into my pocket, said the food was probably cold by now, and started clearing the table. She asked what was wrong. Told her nothing was wrong, which was true, because nothing was wrong anymore. It was simply over. She just didn't know it yet. Went home and slept on it, and I don't mean I lay awake agonizing. I mean I actually slept, better than I had in months. Woke up clear-headed. The next Friday, right on schedule, the reminder went off. Her calendar invite, the one she'd built before she ever asked me, buzzing away at 6 p.m., exactly like it had all year. I sat down at my kitchen table and did the one thing I am genuinely, provably good at. Closed a claim. Opened a blank report in the same format I'd been using for a year, and filled it out one final time. Didn't rush it either. Sat there with the blank fields the same way I sit, with a fresh claim at work, calm, no anger in it, just working the facts. A year earlier, that first report went out as a joke, and I couldn't have told you it would end here. Effort this week, 0. Regrets, 0. Then, because old habits die hard, I added the fields I use at work every single day. Claim status, denied. Assessment. This account has been operating at a total loss since the reporting period began. All contributions absorbed, none reciprocated, no recoverable value remaining. Coverage terminated. Read it back once. And I'll be honest, it was the cleanest report I wrote all year. Hit send. Then I drove over, set her key on the table by the door, grabbed the few things of mine still at her place, and left before she'd even finished reading it. Phone started going off before I'd made it home. She called, didn't pick up. The texts came in a flood, and I read them stopped at a red light. At first she thought it was a joke, asked if the 0 was a typo. Then it clicked for her, and she pivoted fast. Said we could talk about it, that maybe the report system had gotten a little out of hand, that she was open to revising the criteria. Revising the criteria. Even now, even here, her reflex was to renegotiate the terms of the review rather than look at what the review had done. She offered to make it mutual, said she'd write reports too from now on, said we could drop the frequency down. A full year of me asking for exactly that, and it takes a denial letter to finally get the offer on the table. I sent back 2 words. Appeal denied, then I muted the thread. She showed up at my place a few days later. I almost didn't open the door, but I did, because I wanted to see if any of it had actually reached her. She stood there and led with the criteria again. Said she'd been thinking, and she'd figured out where the system went wrong and how we could fix it going forward. Not once in the whole conversation did she say she was sorry for the anniversary, or the deadline talk while I was sick, or citing the food she brought me during the worst week of my year. The closest she got was admitting the scores may have been a little harsh sometimes. A little harsh. I told her I wasn't looking to renegotiate anything, that the account was closed. She said I was being cold, that shutting down like this was, and I want you to appreciate this, kind of toxic. After a year of grading me, the problem in the end was my tone when I finally stopped showing up for the review. I wished her well and shut the door. And that was genuinely the last real conversation we had. Then I muted the thread, told the school friend what I'd done, showed him the final report before I muted everything. He read the 0, the denied, the coverage terminated line, and he actually laughed, but not in a mean way. Said it was the most on-brand breakup he'd ever heard of, that of course the adjuster closed it like a claim. Then he got serious for a second and said he'd been waiting a long time for me to see it, that he hadn't wanted to push because I had to reach it myself. He was right, and I told him so. The group chat turn is the part that confirmed I'd read the claim right, in case I had any doubt left. Within a couple of weeks it got back to me, through the same friend who'd introduced us, what the group had started saying, the exact women who'd called the report iconic, who'd asked for the template, who'd cheered about a man finally being held accountable. They'd flipped the whole story. The new line was that I'd never really tried, that the reports themselves proved I was just going through the motions, that Priya deserved someone who put in effort naturally. Naturally. After a year of being scored on a 10-point scale for exactly that. The woman who'd told me to my face that effort had to be trained into men was now telling everyone I simply hadn't produced enough of it on my own. You can't win a game where the rules quietly rewrite themselves the second you walk away from the table, so I stopped playing it. Here's the part I honestly didn't see coming. A couple of months later, I met someone, Marisol. Completely ordinary way, nothing dramatic. We got talking through some work-adjacent thing, and it grew from there. And the first time I made her dinner, nothing fancy, just something quick on a weeknight after a long day. She said thank you. That was the whole thing. Thank you. That was really good. No score, no scale, no follow-up asking how it made her feel. No question about whether it counted toward anything. I actually sat there for a second not knowing what to do with myself. A year of being audited had me braced for a number that was never coming. Took me an embarrassing while to relax into the idea that effort could just be a thing you hand someone, and they take it and say thanks. And that's the entire transaction. No ledger, no baseline creeping up behind you every week. Early on with Marisol, I caught myself doing the old math after I planned something for us, bracing for the grade. She just had a good time and told me she'd had a good time, and that was it. No notes, no scale, no request that I write up how it made her feel. One evening I actually told her about the reports, the whole system, half expecting her to think I was exaggerating. She got quiet and then said that sounded exhausting, and that a person shouldn't have to audition to be loved. Audition to be loved. She said it plainly, not as some big speech, just an obvious thing, and it landed harder than a year of scores ever did. There was also a week I dropped the ball with her. Forgot something I'd said I'd handle, genuinely my fault. She told me she was annoyed. We talked about it for 10 minutes, and then it was over. No permanent record, no citing it back to me a month later. Turns out that's just how it's supposed to work when the point is the relationship and not the paperwork. I still think about the reports now and then, not in a sad way, more the way you remember a strange claim you worked once and never quite shook. Last I heard, and I promise I don't go looking, Priya's still out there running her frameworks, still has her group, still has her theory about men, still hunting for someone to slot into the system and grade. And honestly, good luck to whoever that turns out to be. If there's a takeaway here, it's a small one, nothing grand. A relationship where you have to keep proving you deserve to be in it isn't a relationship. It's a probation period that never ends. The right person doesn't hand you a rubric, they just let you in. Took me a full year and a report format to figure out something that obvious, so I'm not going to act like I'm smart about it. Me, I spent that whole year as both things at the same time, the adjuster and the damage. The guy writing the report and the guy getting marked down on it. Only claim I ever worked where I was standing on both sides of the counter. Closed it out the one honest way I knew how. Effort, 0. Regrets, 0. Coverage terminated. And for the first time in a year, nobody scored me on the wording. Anyway, that's the story. If your relationship comes with a performance review, quit before they promote you to permanent.